What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if any of you guys are part of the Discord server, you guys know that actually, as of about 10 minutes ago, I finished interviewing Tom Holland, Zendaya, and Jacob Batalon for Spider-Man No Way Home, and I asked them two of the questions that you all had in the Discord server. So the video will hopefully go up tomorrow, and then hopefully you guys will be able to find out which one of you got your question answered. Having said that, we are picking back up again with SpiderVerse. Now, one of the things we're doing here, this actually kind of opens up initially with Spider-Man 2099. And again, one of the things to remember is the 2099 universe is where that great big huge battle between Deimos and the various Spider-Men unfolded. And so while you did have like Peter Parker and a lot of those guys who all just kind of took off to different realities and so on, Miguel O'Hara from Spider-Man 2099, he never left, right? He's basically been here the whole time, along with Lady Spider and with Six-Armed Spider-Man, who's actually from a universe, which we'll talk about here in a second, which is a really, really cool story because it ties into a video that we've already done. And it actually kind of ties into a character that's going to be in the MCU. So the idea behind this is that we initially pick up with Tyler Stone. Now, Tyler Stone is basically one of the high-ranking members of Alchemax. As those of you guys may have recalled, if you've read Spider-Man 2099, if you didn't, the nature of Alchemax is they're basically like a mega corporation. So think of them as like Amazon in the future is basically what they are, right? They're just a really crony company that's just done some really shady stuff. But Tyler Stone, his relationship with Miguel O'Hara is a little bit complicated. And the reason why is because really in the early days of Spider-Man 2099 back in the mid-1990s, it was really more that Tyler Stone was kind of a dick and that Miguel O'Hara wasn't really a big fan of Alchemax engaging in like human testing with experiments and things like that initially kind of led him to becoming Spider-Man in the first place, or at least having a vendetta against it. The other part of that, and really the more personal motivation here, is that Tyler Stone seemed to basically be responsible for getting Miguel O'Hara addicted to a drug called Rapture, and then use the ability of Alchemax to supply that drug as a means to basically keep Miguel on a short leash. Now, in Spider-Man 2099, issue number 25, you actually learn a few things. The first is that Tyler Stone is the biological father of Miguel O'Hara, and two, Miguel was never actually addicted to Rapture. So basically, he was manipulated by Tyler Stone. And that's why, over the course of Marvel's publication history, in addition to just the nefarious things that Alchemax does, while Miguel O'Hara has always had a vendetta against Alchemax, he's always had more of a personal vendetta against Tyler Stone. And in fact, there's actually been instances specifically with what was going on right up until this story was being written, where Miguel O'Hara had to actually go back in time, or at least was trapped in the past, but had to essentially ensure that Tyler Stone lived because he was his biological father. If Tyler Stone died before he could father Miguel O'Hara would cease to exist. So literally, he had to save the life of the man he hated in order to preserve his own existence. And so one of the things that goes on here is that with Tyler Stone being head of what is in effect the secret police of Alchemax, that they're basically told like, hey, like Miguel O'Hara just came back from the past and he's here with a few other guys. Now, the funny thing about this is that despite his business savvy, Tyler Stone doesn't seem to be too intelligent when it comes to like technology and things like that. The reason why is because when he asked the question, like he was barely gone for an hour, how did he get back so fast? The question that's given to him is time doesn't work that way. For us, he's been gone for an hour, but it could very well be that he's been stranded wherever he was at for like months or years, right? Where it just took him that long to find a way to get back here. And one of the things that's pointed out here, which is kind of interesting, is they're like, I'm kind of surprised that we didn't end up with a paradox where like he came back before we sent him into the past and then warned himself to basically ensure that we can't trick him into going into the past. And so we basically have this kind of wonky, wild situation, probably like this total breakdown of reality and things along those lines. But, you know, leaving out all the crazy zaniness of it, you basically end up just kind of picking up with the situation where finally Miguel O'Hara makes his presence known to his brother Gabe, as well as introducing Six-Armed Spider-Man and Lady Spider. Now, something that I do want to point out here is that at first glance, you may think this is Doppelganger. For those of you guys who don't know who Doppelganger is, and if you recall our coverage on Infinity War, one of the things that Magus, the future evil version of Adam Warlock, did is he basically created doppelgangers of various characters out there. A doppelganger of Thanos, doppelganger of the Avengers, and a doppelganger of Spider-Man. Due to his popularity, he basically lingered on following the events of Infinity War, but it was basically like this kind of twisted, evil, six-armed version of Peter Parker. The idea here with this version of Peter Parker is that if you guys recall our discussion on really the character explanation of Michael Morbius, is we actually solidified this idea that with his initial introduction, or at least kind of going into his introduction, his first encounter with Spider-Man came by way of Peter's attempt to cure himself of basically being Spider-Man. The result is that it actually led to him developing 6 arms. This is an alternate reality where that was never solved, right? Where he basically kept 6 arms. So again, kind of an interesting little thing there. But the whole idea behind this is that you end up having, of course, Miguel basically warning Gabe and saying things are kind of popping off and that we've got inheritors chasing after us and all that kind of crazy stuff. And where they're trying to buy their time as best they can and basically stay hidden, that again, because they're spiders and because the inheritors track spiders, Deimos is able to track them down incredibly fast. Now remember, the motivation of Deimos here is twofold. The first is that, of course, they're spiders. So Deimos wants to basically kill them, consume their life energy, and leave them. The second thing is he's trying to recover his body. Remember, the inheritors have cloning technology. They have the ability to basically take their consciousness and download it into a new clone body every single time they're basically killed, no matter what the circumstance is. And so the various spiders being in possession of a body of the inheritors means they can reverse engineer it, and they can find a way to destroy the inheritors and actually keep them from being able to download their consciousness inside of a body. Deimos basically goes after all of them. Now, the funny thing here is that Lady Spider is not an actual spider character, meaning she didn't really get her powers from like a radioactive spider bite, so she's not really tied directly into the spider totems per se. She doesn't have that mystical connection. And so where Deimos can't really siphon her life energy, I mean, I guess he could, right? But it would be like eating a carrot when what he wants is a steak. You know what I mean? Like it just wouldn't really quite satiate him in the way that he needs, that he actually kind of entertains this idea of quote unquote using her for his own ends. Now, we'll actually find out what that means when we pick up with Spider-Woman and the story of Jessica Drew, because not everything is what it seems when it comes to the inheritors, that they have as much contradiction and hypocrisy going on as they do their belief in their righteous cause. But regardless, Gabe buys him a little bit of time when he basically blasts Deimos through like a wall, you know, using like this just massive gun. And then the fight basically takes out into the city. Now, while all that's going on, Tyler wants to grab Miguel, right? I mean, he basically wants to like incapacitate Spider-Man, remove him from the landscape so we didn't have to worry about Spider-Man like stopping Alchemax, like your standard traditional like villains fighting heroes kind of arc, right? And so that's why you see like the secret police who are out here, like these, you know, soldier guys. And of course, Deimos rolls right through these. I mean, at this point, the existence of these guys being here is really more of a nuisance than anything else, but it does provide a helpful scenario for Miguel O'Hara. And the reason why is because for each one of these guys, right, like the public eye, as they're referred to, for each one of these guys, they've got an uplink directly to Tyler Stone, who runs them all. And so whatever they see and hear, Tyler Stone sees and hears as well. And so that's why, where I wouldn't say Tyler Stone adopts the philosophy that like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, it is one of these things where he's like, okay, so this guy Deimos, or whoever this guy is a far more credible threat in the moment here and now. And that Miguel O'Hara and I, at the very least, have some kind of like loose goal, which is to see this guy destroyed. Now, Tyler Stone doesn't really know enough to know about anything that's going on here. And in fact, his desire to appease Miguel O'Hara is really rooted more in the fact that Miguel's pissed, right? He's like, you tricked me or you sent me back to 2014. Like ordinarily, I would beat the absolute crap out of you. And you know just as well as I do, I could, right? Like this little cat and mouse game we have, like it really is just a game we play. But at the end of the day, like I could kill you where you are. So if you don't want me to do that out of just sheer anger and irritation, understand that you are correct when you surmise the situation and say, I'm not worried about you right now because I've got more important things to worry about. But what I do need from you is to literally activate something for me, right? Like he basically tells him, Alchemax, floor 82, lab C. You know exactly what I mean. Have it ready for me. And so where Miguel O'Hara basically leads, you know, Deimos to this particular location, once everything pops off, and in fact, you know, Lady Spider kind of does what she can in the fight between the two, that is really more of Miguel playing possum to a degree, right? I mean, not insofar that like he fakes his own injury or death, but basically luring Deimos to this spot in Alchemax, and then as soon as Deimos gets there, he immediately goes to attack Miguel O'Hara and then just gets electrocuted. And the reason why is because Miguel has him trapped in what's basically a stasis cell. Now, here's an important thing to grasp here, and this is one of the reasons why I always kind of felt like Miguel O'Hara in a lot of ways was a more capable version of Spider-Man, of Peter Parker. It's not necessarily that he's better, but the technology of the time, of course, is more advanced than it is in the main Marvel universe, but Peter Parker was always more of like a comedic character. And so it would usually break down to him just kind of pissing off the villain and then letting the villain basically like defeat themselves by way of their carelessness because they let their anger get the better of them. Miguel was a lot more methodical, and I would say even to a degree he was a lot darker than Peter Parker was. But I think there was more methodology that went into Miguel O'Hara being Spider-Man than it did with Peter Parker being Spider-Man. And that's one of the reasons why Miguel O'Hara, when he first popped up, really did develop his own fan base. Like people loved Miguel O'Hara back in the day because he was just so starkly different different from what you normally saw. But regardless, with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching. Keep your eyes out for part 2. We will have that up later on today, and I will catch you all later. Peace.